What is the news on this?
So a lot of people are confused, thinking that this is dealing with the legislature's lawsuit against the governor. That lawsuit is still taking place, and the Supreme Court, as many people do know, they decided not to let the legislature and the governor jump over essentially the Court of Appeals to have the Supreme Court hear that one right away. So I want to say, 2 weeks ago now that the Court of Appeals was just hearing oral arguments from the legislature and the governor on that case. And the Court of Appeals will have their decision issued by this Friday, I believe, is the deadline for that decision to come out. And of course, whoever loses that will appeal to the Michigan Supreme Court, but that is not this particular case. So the case that you and I are talking about is actually a case that was filed by 4 or 5 different doctors' offices, and then a patient who was denied having a surgery because of these executive orders. So those parties came together as the plaintiffs in a case where they sued the governor, the attorney general, and the director of the Department of Health and Human Services, and they sued in federal district court. So what the federal court judge did, though, in that case was to say, you know what, there's some issues of state law that could potentially resolve this case. In other words, if what the judge was saying in the federal case is that if the issues being raised if the plaintiffs can prove that the governor and the attorney general and basically the state of Michigan government is violating our state law or state constitution in what they're doing with these executive orders, then the federal court judge wasn't even going to rule or make any decisions with regard to how it violates the US Constitution or any federal statutes. So what the federal court judge said was, at this point, the Michigan Supreme Court has not specifically ruled on these very issues with these executive orders. So the federal court judge did what's called, he certified 2 questions down to the Michigan Supreme Court and said, I need you to answer these 2 particular questions before the case that's in front of me can continue to move forward. So the parties that were in that case stayed on as parties in this case, and it got to skip over all those other levels of state government, the Court of Claims and the Court of Appeals, goes right to the Supreme Court. So on September 2nd, the oral argument that's going to be heard by the Michigan Supreme Court is specifically addressing the 2 issues. One, of whether these governor's executive orders after April 30th, if they violate the state statutes, which they do. And number 2, if these executive orders violate our state constitutional provisions with regard to separation of powers and the non-delegation doctrine. And so those issues are what are being very narrowly looked at in terms of these executive orders by the Michigan Supreme Court on September 2nd. So with that being said, I don't represent any of the parties in that case. What I did was, just like in the legislature's lawsuit against the governor, I filed what's called an amicus brief. And usually when you file one of those, the last one I filed was on behalf of a nationwide group of physicians that wanted to have a particular position heard on a case that regarded or dealt with medical freedom. So I filed on behalf of them. In this case, though, what I've been doing is literally been filing as an unofficial attorney for the people of Michigan in general, because the legislature, they represent us, right? But the positions that they're arguing are not for the betterment of the people in front of the court. They are for the betterment of the institution that is known as the legislature. So I have asked the court to allow me to submit briefs on both of those cases that are before it, basically defending the US and Michigan constitutions, as well as the rights of all citizens and Michigan residents here. So of course, unofficially, because I don't have a retainer agreement with all 10 million people here in Michigan. Doing so, though, is very rare. And you can submit us a brief. So it is the policy of the Michigan Supreme Court to generally accept briefs that are submitted by these amicus attorneys and parties. However, having oral argument time is not really something that generally happens. So you can ask for it, but it's just normally the only people that get to participate in the actual oral argument time in front of the Michigan Supreme Court would be the attorneys representing the plaintiffs and the attorneys representing the defendants.
We've heard a
So
lot about various different lawsuits during this entire time. There have been several, including the one you mentioned with the legislature. Uh, but I remember this one specifically because I had a friend who, and this is a very serious situation, but he had cancer in both of his kidneys. And in order to have the surgery, they kept kind of postponing. They were going to take the kidneys out. And I think eventually, I think he had that surgery in May, but they called him one last time and said, we're going to have to push this off a little further. And he said, I don't know what to do here. This is not an elective surgery. This is life or death. And he said, I might have to join that lawsuit. Well, thankfully, the surgery was going to take place the other side of the state. The hospital called him back and said, okay, we're going to go ahead and do it. And he was able to get it done. But Catherine would tell you that after the surgery was done, the very concerning information that came back from the physician who did the surgery, took the kidneys out and looked at the cancer, said it was just, a hair length away from spreading and outside of the kidneys into his body. And he said, if that would have happened, would have been a completely different story. And this is a very close friend of mine. And I know that story he's not the only one. There are many people who have had various other situations like this. And thankfully, the good news in this story, and it's going to have a happy ending, is because he was able to have the kidneys out, he's going to be able to have a transplant coming up in September. So there is a happy ending, but it was inches away from being a not very happy ending. And I don't know how many people in the state of Michigan were subjected to things like that.
yeah. And I myself have received numerous calls from people looking for me to help because they are being denied medical services left and right because they cannot medically wear a mask. And yet they're being denied service for not having a mask on when they need to go to the emergency room or their physician's office.
It's incredible.
It's ridiculous. So there's many people that they're hurting, they're dying, they're suffering because of the lack of common sense and the way that these unconstitutional orders have been handed out like they're going out of style. So the good news, I guess, in all of this is that, and for those legal nerds at home, my request was made under Michigan Court Rule 7.312H5, which does allow oral argument to take place from amicus attorneys, but only with special permission from the court. So last Wednesday night, I actually received an order from the Michigan Supreme Court that explained that there were 3 parties that filed amicus briefs. All 3 were accepted. The main one that you guys would be aware of would be the Christine Gregg, the House Minority Leader for the State House of Representatives here in Michigan. She has the amicus brief that was filed on behalf of the governor. And then there were 2 that were filed on behalf of essentially the plaintiffs, so to speak. What happened is that the court also said in that order is that all 3 of those briefs are accepted. So they'll consider all the arguments in those briefs. The plaintiff in that case is granted 30 minutes of oral argument time. The Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and the governor have a shared 20 minutes of oral argument time. The Attorney General will have 20 minutes of oral argument time. And then I actually was granted 5 minutes of oral argument time that day.
Wow. So what day is this? And then we'll make sure we stay up with it. So we can keep
September 2nd, which I believe is a Wednesday.
Okay.
And at this point, I honestly don't know if they intend to hold the hearings by Zoom or if they're going to do it in person. So the order was silent on that issue. I will definitely keep my ears open though and share the word when I do know what it's going to be. Mm-hmm. I have heard that there is a group who is trying to, it was a group that put on one of the big rallies back in April, and they are possibly looking at doing something to bring the people of Michigan together that day. So
Mm.
whether the hearing is in person or whether the hearing is on Zoom, to be able to have a place where the people of Michigan can collect and be able to participate, if you will, in what's happening in that court that day, to be able to show the justices, to show the legislature that the people they care about this issue, they're involved, and they're paying attention, and they want all three branches of our government to stand up and start doing the right thing here.
It's a slow moving train, this justice, but at least it's moving and appears to be going in the right direction at this point. Attorney Katherine Henry, thank you so much for being here with us today to give us an update on this historic information. Restore Freedom, the initiative underway as well. Restore Freedom MI, and of course, Attorney Katherine Henry. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, we actually have a new website. The MI will still take you there, but Restore Freedom KH, I have officially blended the law firm efforts and doing this kind of work with the filing of these briefs on behalf of the people into what we're doing with the Restore Freedom Initiative petition, where we're still collecting the 425,000 signatures. But both of those efforts are now blended. So restorefreedomkh.com is actually the new main website.
We'll put links up online too at woodradio.com. Appreciate you being here with us. Good luck to you. And thank you so much. Have a great week.
Yes, thanks. You too.
That's Attorney Katherine.